Here's the surprising way to make more money and have more fun. It's to have a 4-day work week. In today's episode with Joe Sanok, he is the author of Thursday is the New Friday, How to Work Fewer Hours, Make More Money, and Spend Time Doing What You Want. So, Joe, tell us, how can we make more money and have more fun with a 4-day work week?
Welcome to Awakened Titans podcast with Lily Patrascu. Mind-blowing conversations with influential business titans sharing how you can manifest abundance, love, joy, success through quantum awakening, quantum manifestation, quantum healing, quantum miracles, exponential business growth, and innovative products and services.
Yeah, I think it starts with looking at kind of how we got here. So the industrialists taught us that if you plug in a machine, a Model T kicks out on the other side, that we can have predictable things within our businesses. The problem with that model is it doesn't take into account how different each of us are. I don't think any of us would say all of our staff are exactly the same. We wouldn't say that even if people are in the same role that they're the same, that they're actually different. So when we think about actually that industrialist model, that doesn't work anymore. The 40-hour work week is less than 100 years old. It came out in 1926 when Henry Ford started that to sell more cars to his employees. And so when we start to shift that mindset from being an industrialist to being a post-industrialist, a few things change. So the first thing is that we want a prescription model where it's like, here's the exact way to do everything, versus a menu model where we look at, okay, what is it that we want to try? What is it that we want to do? There's even a recent release from Google talking about the way that people purchase no longer is kind of the funnel model we've all been taught, where you get onto an email list and then you just kind of follow the funnel. Instead, it's, we go on adventures. We learn about a product and then we forget about it and we go and we learn about it more. That it's not as streamlined as it used to be. And so if we're looking at growing our wealth and growing the amount of free time that we have to start with that the old model is broken, and there's a lot of ways that we can take this new model and the neuroscience and use it to our advantage.
Thank you. So tell us, how do we start implementing the model of the 4-day work week to make it work for us?
Yeah, so we start with our internal inclinations. And so what are those things that are natural postures in the world? So in the book, I talk about how curiosity, the ability to move on it, and an outsider perspective are the three essential areas that top leaders have. Now, we may not have those as natural things in our lives. I think about how my daughters just had their cousins over recently, and they were all outside, and they got really quiet. And, whenever kids get really quiet, something's up. And so I peeked my head outside, and they were all standing around a dead mouse that they found in my backyard. And they were having this conversation around, like, how do you think the mouse died? Like, should we have a mouse funeral? But what if an owl wants to eat the mouse? Like, they had never really seen a dead mouse just like in the wild. So kids are naturally curious. They're always trying to figure out, okay, am I seeing something for the first time that's really unique, like a car accident, and I don't have to be scared that's going to happen every day? Is it like a rainbow that we only see once in a while? Or is it something that's really normal in the world? So curiosity is about seeing the world through the eyes of questions and of like what could be. And so top leaders do that, having the ability to move on it. So we're not going to get paralyzed by perfection. We're going to be testing and trying things, and to maintain that outsider's perspective. The research says that outsiders have more influence than insiders. And so how do we put ourselves into situations to really understand that outsider perspective? So if we start with those internal inclinations, then we move into slowing down. Now, most of the time we look at kind of the business world, the hustle culture. It talks about how we got to do more with less. We've got to, optimize everything. Do your cold plunge, drink your green tea, whatever the thing is. But the reality is that the neuroscience shows that when we're stressed out and maxed out, we do worse work. So we need to start with slowing down. We need to start with how do we make sure we have very strong boundaries around our time? So that's where the 4-day work week can come in. There's a lot of other tools and things we work with our consulting clients on that I'm happy to go into. But then after that, that's when we kill it. That's when we sprint, we learn our sprint type. We figure out how do we do work better in a way that optimizes based on the neuroscience instead of just, what we see on some random armchair expert on social media.
Thank you. Now, how do you overcome the fact that you're literally reducing the amount of time you're spending working?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because we think that time is this finite thing and tasks are finite things. There was a researcher named Parkinson who discovered Parkinson's law. And so one part of that is often reported on, and the other part not so much. So Parkinson's law, the first part of it is that work expands to the time given. So back in college, if I remembered that I had a paper due the next day that I hadn't worked on, I'd stay up all night, I'd turn it in. It might not be my best paper, might get a C on it or a B, but I'd get it done. Now, if I found out, 4 weeks ahead of time, planned it out, put it in my calendar, it would take me 4 weeks. I'd write the paper, I'd go to the writing center, I'd revise it and revise it. And so the work expands to the time that we give it. The other side of that Parkinson discovered that is rarely reported on is the natural bloating of organizations. And so he was looking at the British Navy, and he found that anytime a new sign-off or regulation was added to a system, it was assumed that that needed to stay. So for example, there's a pink slip to sign off on this thing within the Navy. We're going to add a blue slip. And now we have a blue slip and a pink slip. But, in 2 or 3 years, we don't know why we do the pink slip and why we do the blue slip. So there's this bloating of organizations over time. So if we think about if you, Lily, had, say, 20 high-level tasks you had to do in the next week, but I told you can only do 15 of them, you'd probably go through some sort of decision-making process and say, okay, like what's going to make me the most money? What's going to give me the most joy? What's going to give me the most time freedom? What's going to make my team be most cohesive? What's going to help me move towards my big goals? You'd have some way that you would figure out, here's what I need to do to work on the 15 instead of the 20. Now, those remaining 5 that you didn't work on, that's a great opportunity to say to yourself, why is this even on my list? If these 15 are the things that I care about the most, maybe I need to outsource some of these. Maybe I need to eliminate them completely. Maybe I need to automate them through some systems. Maybe no longer am I the one that needs to be the full lead on that, but I need to hire some people to kind of replicate myself. So it allows you then to learn to scale bigger by focusing on less. And you're focusing on the right things then. And then you're also cutting out all of those things, the equivalent to that pink slip and blue slip that we talked about with the British Navy. There might be things that you've outgrown as a leader that you're still doing, you're putting time into, stress into, all of that, but really it's not a great use of your time anymore.
Thank you. Now, let's say if I'm hiring Pedro, okay, for 5 days a week, and then all of a sudden I'm introducing the 4 days a week formula. How would that work for me, for example, as an employer? Because I'm thinking that it wouldn't. Because I think that my intention, you can say, as an employer, is that, let's say in the first 6 months, my employee is going to be, learning a lot and, performing the best that they can. But really, I know that there's at least a learning curve of, let's say, 6 months for them to really do the job. But then I'm thinking after 6 months, they will be really good. So in 5 days a week, I can really get so much work done. And if I were to reduce that to 4 days a week, like what would I gain as an employer, for example?
Yeah. The research, there's been numerous research studies. If you look up 4-day Workweek on Google Scholar, there's over 2,000 peer-reviewed articles that have just come out in the last couple of years. And so what your question's based on is that we assume that people are 100% productive during those 5 days. When we actually look at it, the productivity of a 32-hour work week and the productivity of a 40-hour work week is almost identical. What we also see is that people are going to be doing things when they're working 40 hours in a week that isn't work. They'll be scheduling doctor's appointments. They'll be figuring out what their plans are for the weekend. They'll be talking with coworkers, and we justify that talking as, well, it's team building, it's connecting with them, but it's not that full productivity. And so when we give people the liberty to say, we know you're probably only working 30 to 32 hours a week anyway, we trust you to use those other 8 hours to do the things you need to do with your life, we find that people are actually less stressed out in their work, and they're less likely to quit, and you retain people longer. So we assume that, people are going to, when they're these high productivity people, they're going to stay there. But no, they're probably going to then start saying to you, well, I want to have a raise. They might start shopping for another job. They might, if they're highly sought after, they might be leaving. There's a college in Southwest Michigan called Kalamazoo Valley Community College. There was this guy, Ted Forrester, who was an HVAC instructor. So he's looking at big systems of heating and cooling for buildings. He's teaching students this stuff. He realized that in the summertime, that there weren't many students that were there on Fridays. And so he ended up talking to the board about what if in the summer we just did a 4-day work week. Did it as an experiment for a year. My math shows us that we'll save millions of dollars in air conditioning costs in the summer. They actually found that, yes, they did save, when they did that test, they did save millions of dollars in air conditioning costs. But they also found that what happened was that people stayed longer at the college. They found that student retention went up because then there were different hours of the day that were being done. They found that there were all sorts of ancillary benefits. Out in Golden, Colorado, they implemented this with all of their EMS, with their police, their fire, their ambulance services, and they said that your week caps out at 32 hours. I don't know about you, Lily, but if I think about if I have an emergency, do I want someone that's just worked a 50-hour week behind the wheel trying to save my life or to save my parents' lives? Or do I want someone that's done a 32-hour week? They found that they had better health outcomes there. They found that they saved money in overtime, and they found that they were attracting higher talent because of it. And so the shift that's happening is that when companies start to implement a 4-day work week within their company, they actually see that they aren't seeing as much of the dip that they expected. And that's why I wrote a Harvard Business Review article about how to test the 4-day work week with your company instead of just jumping into it. And to me, doing that testing and having a consultant work with you on that tends to help you implement it faster and to not have the loss of income that a lot of people fear.
Thank you. Tell us about making more money with this 4-day work week incentive.
Yeah. So one thing is that we know that creativity is going to be fueled, especially during that downtime. If we think about your very best ideas as a leader, it's not when you're stressed out. It's not when you're working on something really intensely. It's usually when you're out for a walk. It might be when you're meditating. Maybe you're taking a shower. All sorts of different things that come up. So we often think that we just have to keep plugging away. But even just recently, I had an opportunity where a practice owner was looking to sell their counseling practice. And I have a network of, tens of thousands of counseling practices. And they wanted to sell. And then I had another one that wanted to buy. And so this was a new area where I hadn't been a business broker with many people. I'd probably helped sell or buy 3 or 4 different businesses for other consulting clients. And so it's a new area. Now, if I was stressed out and maxed out, I couldn't dip my toes into that area. But if I'm now going to get 10% from $1 to $2 million deals, and that's going to take me 3 to 10 hours of time, that's a major level up to be able to say, okay, $100,000 for 10 hours is a pretty good amount of money for most people. And so if I was stressed out and maxed out, I wouldn't have even been able to think that through. I wouldn't have been able to test that market. I sent out an email to my list and said, are you looking at buying or selling in the next year? If so, fill out this form. So then I had 19 people overnight say, hey, I want to buy or I want to sell. So it's a way that I could then say, let me test this market, and see if it's something that somebody wants to purchase or be a part of. And then as a result, now I can align my team around these new products. Now, when we're looking at, being stressed out and having, 5 or 6 days a week we're working, we just don't have those good ideas or that vision to implement those things.
Thank you. In terms of having more fun with a 4-day work week, don't you find that, let's say, if you give the opportunity to your employees to work 4 days a week, they might get a second job, like for Friday and Saturday? Or
they very well may. And ultimately, I think sometimes there's this feeling of ownership over your employees. To me, it's important for the leader to set the example. So, I work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I work from 9:30 to 3:30 because I want to walk my daughter to school and I want to walk and pick her up from school. And then on Mondays, I do a little bit of email. On Fridays, I don't work. Every Monday and Friday, do yoga with my partner. We have things that we do together. So it comes from the top to say there's value in not working. Now, in a lot of Western society, we have overvalued work and we've undervalued fun. So to me, having those conversations of what's lighting you up, to if a staff is struggling, to have those conversations of what are you doing for your own wellness? What are you doing to enjoy your time? What are you doing with your kids? Like even this morning, I have a standing meeting with my COO. I saw that it disappeared from my calendar. I didn't even need to know why it disappeared. I, out of humanity, said, "Hey, what's going on?" But not out of any sort of accountability. Her son was sick. He needed to go to the doctor and see a specialist, and it came up last minute. I trust that employee to then do what they need to do. Now, that takes time to build that culture. And if someone chooses to go do that, we're going to see that they're more stressed out. If they're working the 4-day work week and then they go get another job and they're stressed out and maxed out in their job at work, we're going to see that. We're going to have conversations around that. The benefits of the 4-day work week aren't going to be there.
Thank you. Tell us about how having more fun by having a 3-day weekend, how that powers you up to become more productive and to make more money over the longer term.
Yeah. So one area that I would say is a value of mine personally is I've pushed myself into trying new things. And the neuroscience supports that when we try new things, that we're happier, that we naturally, through learning in adulthood, feel more grounded. We feel happier when we read books that aren't just for business and find things to do and go on vacations or go on trips to learn new things. These new experiences help us feel more human, that we're not just in the I have to buy, sell, this whole, that's somehow the best and highest value. So a lot of people think you have to have the 3-day weekend to implement a lot of this. And we actually have plenty of consulting clients that are working on moving towards that, but they're not there. So we developed the +1 -1 exercise, which is a really good exercise to start to build that menu I talked about to find more happiness. So on any time that you're off, so it could be, maybe it's just 1 day a week for you at this point. We look at what's one thing that we can do in preparation for the future week. So usually weekends are in reaction to the previous week. I had a stressful week. I'm going to overdrink. I'm going to oversleep. I'm going to do all these things that don't make me feel real good, but helps me, feel like I'm reacting to that week behind me. Instead, we want to look at preparation instead of reaction. And so the +1 -1 exercise helps us with that. So +1, we're going to look at, I've got some time tomorrow morning, and what is something I can add to my schedule that might help me be able to feel a little more grounded, a little more bounced back. So I might say, I want to just drink a green tea and read for half an hour without the kids interrupting me. So I have to communicate with the kids. I have to communicate if I have a partner, say, hey, I'm going to spend some time reading a book that has nothing to do with business, and I'm going to just spend half an hour doing that. Now, that may not do anything for you. You may say, I thought that was going to make me feel good, but it may not. Okay, well, that's moving away from that prescription model. That's moving into the menu model. Okay, it's like I tried that appetizer and I don't like that appetizer. It may be something that you find, okay, I do like this thing. It's not always going to work every single time. So we start to build that +1 list. Then we look at our -1. What can we take off of our weekend that might have the chance of helping us feel just a little bit better? And so maybe it's, I don't feel like going grocery shopping. I'm going to get groceries delivered to me. Maybe I don't do it every weekend, but I know that if I'm feeling like I want to bounce back, that's a little treat that I can give myself. For me, I don't like mowing my lawn. Also, northern Michigan in the winter gets a ton of snow, and it takes me about an hour to blow the snow off of my driveway. That's an hour or two a week I could be spending with my daughters. I'm a single dad with 90% custody, so I want to spend time with my daughters. So it's $30 to have somebody come push that snow, off and to shovel my driveway around and my front path. So I might spend $300 or $400 a season to have someone to just take care of that snow. For me, I know that that's my -1 or one of my -1s. So we find those small things or those big things that we say we're going to add things to our schedule or remove them that help us feel better. I've got my list of things that, going to do yoga and then sitting in the sauna or sitting in a hot tub or going for a walk in nature. Those are things that for me light me up. Now, Lily, it might be very different for you. There may be other things that you just absolutely love. But when we have that menu, then it's no longer this schedule we have to follow that then makes it so that we feel bad when we don't follow that. Instead, it's the opportunities to feel more grounded in our humanity.
Thank you. Tell us some more tools, apps, or habits that help entrepreneurs to create a 4-day work week when they don't already have that in place.
Yeah. So the very first thing I would do is look ahead in your schedule and say, when can we test this? Can we test this for yourself first? And then we can work at working with employees on it. So when you're looking at your own schedule, I'd say look ahead a month and say, is there one day that I could take off next month to do a 4-day work week? Fridays might not be the best day. It could be Wednesdays. It could be Mondays. It could be 2 half days. To just say 1 week next month, I'm going to work 32 hours. And let's just see what happens. And then schedule something in that's fun or positive to do during that time so you don't get sucked back into potentially working. So it could be that you schedule to go for yoga, you get a massage, you schedule a hike with a friend. So by starting with that, you're probably going to see that the world doesn't fall apart if you work 8 less hours. You're probably going to say, wow, that I feel like a badass business owner. Like I just took 8 hours off extra. Then try it again. See if you can do twice a month. See if you could do, once a week for just the summer. See what you can do where you can push into that a little bit. Look at the numbers, look at the data, see if things actually shift towards the negative like you think. Then when we're looking at implementing this with teams, we want to get a team of people that have similar roles. And so if we have admin staff that have similar roles, we might have 3 to 5 of them. We're going to start with a conversation around what is the DNA of this group. Like, so what is it that we already believe in? What do we think about? And what are the KPIs we're already judged on? So if you're admin, it might be supporting other folks. If you're sales team, you might, a certain number of sales. If it's the marketing team, might be getting marketing campaigns out. Like, what are the KPIs that we're already being judged on? Then we want to look at, okay, what are some rules we're going to set for this team to do an experiment for 3 months around the 4-day work week? So deciding, okay, we're going to take Fridays off, or we're going to take every Tuesday and Wednesday afternoon off, or we're going to decide what is it that makes sense for this team. So we want to have some norms that we all can follow. Every week, then, we're going to have a standing meeting for just 15 minutes to say, let's look back at the previous week and say what happened. And so maybe Jim from accounting sent everyone an email on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Half the team checked it, and Thursday morning they knew about it, and the other half followed the rules and didn't. Now we have to have a discussion. Maybe Jim from accounting gets a really important email every Wednesday that we all should read. So we need to then change the dynamic and have a discussion around that. Or maybe those people need to stop checking their emails in the evening because it makes everyone else look bad. So figuring out what are those norms. We also want to look weekly at our KPIs. So if we're a sales team, our numbers were up. Awesome. What did we do? We worked 32 hours and our numbers were up. Like, that's peculiar. Let's look at what happened there. Or if our numbers are down, what are we going to try this week to turn around to bring those numbers back up? Then each month, we're going to have a longer meeting where we bring together that qualitative, so the good quality things, the stories of what happened. I got to go to my son's baseball game for the first time, or I volunteered in my kid's classroom during the day. And then the quantitative, the KPIs, the numbers, those stats. Hey, our team feels less stressed overall. Maybe we involve some different measures. Then after those 3 months, we're going to bring that all together in a report, and that team's going to make recommendations. Like, we think we should continue this. We think we could expand this into other areas. We think we could try this with other departments, or, actually our KPIs were down quite a bit. I don't know if we can do this. We have to brainstorm differently. So it's that experimental mindset that we walk through. How do we actually implement this 4-day work week to have it launch in a different way?
For those entrepreneurs that are already business titans that are, let's say, they have one 9-figure business and they have, let's say, other businesses of 7-8 figures. Okay. And I know some people like this, that are, let's say, working 16 to 17 hours a day. What would you have them do? Because I think it would be even hard for them to comprehend how they could even reduce 2 hours a week from their calendar, because it just feels so impossible, because there's so many places to spend, there's so many businesses to look at. What would you have them do to at least reduce, 5 hours a week from their calendar, aside from what you just said?
Yeah. I think starting with, are you happy with this schedule? Like, do you like this? There are some people that they've decided they just want to work all the time. They want their life to be that. They don't want relationships. They don't want other things. I would say, I would start with, are you happy? If you are happy, okay, let's say, how could you be happier? What would be something that you would want to do more? And then I would say, what are areas that you're neglecting for this schedule that you find important? It could be romantic relationships. It could be their kids. It could be creative things that aren't to make money. And then to start saying, what could we do to pepper some of that in? Now, ultimately they get to live the life that they want to live. If they're happy with it, then keep doing what you're doing. I think most people that have that schedule say to themselves, okay, I'm making more money than I could ever spend in a lifetime. Like, why am I still doing this? And that's where oftentimes we work with people to say, like, what is the actual impact you want to make in the world? If we just said, okay, like, say we sold all your businesses, you had zero stress left for business. Like, what would you do with your time? So starting to do some exercises to think through, if you for some reason had to sell all of your businesses, you got all the equity from those, and you could just live the life that you want, what would that look like? That's a good thought exercise to think through, like, what's the gap between what I'm doing right now and where I actually would want to be, and what are some small changes I could take to experiment into that. You don't have to sell your big 8 or 9 figure business, but you should think through, am I happy? And if I sold all my businesses, what would I do with my life? Well, what's that gap? And if we can identify that gap, then we can start to say, let's make some micro changes for 1 hour a week. I was working with a therapist out in California, I talk about in the book, and he was making more money than he needed, and he recognized that. And in our pre-consulting call, his wife was on the phone and said, if Jerry doesn't change something, he's going to have a heart attack. And literally between his pre-consulting call and his first consulting call, he had a heart attack. And that was a big wake-up call for him. Hopefully most of us don't need that. But our first question was, what's something you gave up in living this kind of business life? And he said snowboarding. And so I said, okay, what would it take for you to drive up into the mountains every single week and go snowboarding? He was like, oh man, so many things. I said, okay, well, let's talk through it. He had to have his assistant know how to handle when clients called. He had a mega counseling practice. And so if someone called and they were suicidal, like, what's the decision-making matrix? How does she decide who's going to get put in where? How do we make sure that Jerry can go snowboarding all day long and not get phone calls that things are happening? So he had some infrastructure to build. He had some training to do. He had some people to hire before he could go snowboarding. But going snowboarding is a pretty good hook for him, instead of just saying, hey, you get a day off. So we found that hook that he said, I absolutely miss snowboarding so much. So he then started snowboarding and realized by going snowboarding and pulling himself out of the business, he had a stronger business. He had a business that could run without him. If he sells the business, it's more valuable now because he's not embedded in it. If business owners are embedded in the business, it's not as valuable of a business. It's not going to get as much money, when you sell it, because that owner is so embedded. So as good owners, we want to pull ourselves out of the business. We want to make ourselves irrelevant. And one of the best ways to do that is to work less.
Thank you. Now, what I found about experiences where I've had a lot of fun, let's say when I'm dancing or when I'm doing some, activities that are not work. And sometimes actually there is a blend between work and fun where, let's say, I organize events. And I find that the element of fun really fuels me so much for work. And I wonder, what would you have, let's say, these titans do that would give them that little taste that they had almost forgotten? Because I think there are so many titans that are so focused on just working, like you said, and they are it's almost like they've even forgotten what it means to have fun as such, because they're so caught up in all these work tasks, and they've become so good at it, and maybe they get a lot of significance from it as well. What would you have them do to feel that excitement that comes from having fun? Because, for example, for me, I find that having a little bit of fun outside of work really fuels me so much, and it gives me so much joy, so much excitement. And I also feel that it makes me a lot more productive as well, because it's almost like you change your frequency, you change how you feel, and because of that, you are more in flow as well. And I do wonder oftentimes, like how these titans are able to produce despite not having fun. I don't even get it, how they can do it.
Well, I think you tapped on a lot of things there that are true, that, when we have fun, when we take time off, the neuroscience shows that we create better work. Rick Rubin in his book and also on lots of social media talks about how good artists, how good musicians, they aren't creating art with an outcome. They're creating art because they enjoy it. And so finding, how do we get into that flow state where we really enjoy the work we're doing instead of just producing something. I think that what tends to happen is there's an internal narrative that often happens where we feel guilty if we're having fun. We feel guilty if we're going for a hike or we're out with friends, that somehow there's like a productivity gene that's been embedded in our brains. And it could be with how we were raised. It could be, narratives we received early in our careers. It could be society. There's lots of reasons. And deconstructing that, whether that's through therapy or your own coaching or reading or listening to podcasts like this, can help us then realize kind of what's going on. I mean, I even remember this, I think it was 2 weekends ago. My daughters had stayed up late with friends, so they were sleeping in. They're 13 and 10. And I'm still like a teenager. I could sleep in with the best of them. And it was like 10:30 on a Saturday. And I'm laying in bed. I'm like, I should get up. I should do some laundry. I should, get the house in order. And then I'm like, okay, so I'm feeling guilty. And as I'm laying there kind of in this semi-awake consciousness, I'm thinking about that word guilt. Guilt is what we use when we talk about police, when we talk about a judge saying you're guilty. So if we feel guilt is usually external of ourselves. It's a system, it's a law, it's the police, it's a judge. It's something outside of ourselves that has made us that way. And so to examine when we do feel guilt for the work that we're not doing or we are doing or we're not measuring up, that's something outside of yourself. That's the narrative that you've bought into that may not be true. And so I think as we grow into being titans, being a real titan to me is deeply examining the narratives we've been given and questioning those and saying, is this what I want for my life? Is this what I want to pass on for my kids? Is this what I want for my friendships? Is this what I want for my health? Because the thing that may have felt aligned 2 or 5 years ago may no longer be aligned. The pace that you went 2 or 5 years ago may no longer be aligned, and that's okay. But I think a lot of people just stay in that habit rather than deeply examining, is this actually how I want to live my life?
Tell us where entrepreneurs can find you.
Yeah, so I have the Practice of the Practice podcast. We have over 1,200 episodes on all sorts of things around building a business that you absolutely love. We want it to be thriving also. We don't want to give up the thriving side just to love our businesses. So that's probably the best place to send them. Also, the book Thursday is the New Friday is my book. They're welcome to buy that as well.
Thank you.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential business titans, providing you with the insights to awaken to your full potential so you can get paid to be yourself, find true happiness, and manifest anything you desire.